Hello, everybody. This is Dr. Lorenzo Neal, and I am coming today to respond not just to the Jussie Smollett, or however you say his name, incident, but to address a broader issue that I think is being overlooked in this entirety of all that's happening. Regarding our racial interactions, interpersonal interactions, and all that's happening in the larger political spectrum. Last year, in the summer of in June last year, I spoke at the Smith County NAACP Freedom Banquet, and Freedom Banquet, and I was talking in perspective of the things that had happened in the 50 years between 1968 and 1950 and 2018. And there were quite a bit in 1968, the significant events that happened with the assassination of Martin Luther King, the assassination of Robert Kennedy, riots that happened, music trends that changed and shaped our black cultural identity. There were a lot of things that happened in that year, and in the speech I coined the phrase. Well, I believe I coined this phrase called regressive nostalgia, and what I meant and what I mean by regressive nostalgia is if you've been paying attention within the last 3 or 4 years, there's been this seemingly desire and action of returning to things that we used to like. For example, you saw the return of television shows that people really loved, that even though they were breaking then, now people just wanted them to come back. You like Will and Grace and Roseanne. Of course, you know what happened with the Roseanne show. And then I put that also in the perspective of the seemingly racial tensions that were happening. The idea that there was a rise in hate crimes, and of course we know that has been proven not to be false, but misleading. There is an increase in facets of race, hate crimes, and there's also been an increase in reporting of false race crimes, hate crimes. I don't mean race, but hate crimes in particular. So you can look that up. So there's this seemingly idea that we want to go backwards. Backwards. The old days were better. In any generation, you hear the old folk talking. Back in my day, we used to do this. Back in my day, the music was like this. Back in my day, and I found myself saying the same thing with some of the young people. When I was in school, we used to do this. It's just a natural thing. And when it comes to the arts and media, we see that we have this nostalgia, 90s music parties, and all of that. 80s music. Now you can have there's stations dedicated just to music from that genre, from genre of music from that decade, and there's nothing wrong with that. I think that's great. But here's the problem. What I am finding is that not only is there a sense of nostalgia for the old days, I'm seeing it in a broader sense that there's a nostalgia for the old days regarding how races interacted. So I was talking to a pastor friend of mine on Monday evening, and we were talking about these seemingly increased people who feel infringed upon when they see the red hat, even if it has make America great on it or not. They just see a red hat and they have some sense of dread. And I was like, there's got to be something to it. Then I realized we have a regressive nostalgia happening where somewhere the general place in life, people are trying to get us back to that space. They have to have something to fight for. They have to have this sense that there's a race war, or there is segregation, or there is you know, deep rooted systemic racism. I'm not arguing that there isn't. I do know, because I live in Mississippi, there are pockets of systemic racism, and I use the word systemic in a very generalized sense. There are pockets of persons who hold on to racial identity issues, you know, and that concerns us. We still have pockets of white Americans who would rather go back to that day when it was pretty much the white people ruled everything. You know, there was a great sense of privilege, and now we're seeing that privilege being distributed at a greater pace across the color line. And so now we have black privilege, we have Hispanic privilege, Latino, you know, privilege, we have LGBTQ privilege. But in that same spectrum of privilege, there are persons who are still trying to get the spotlight of oppression. So you have people who are saying, okay, yeah, we have more privilege, but we still need to be oppressed. We got to find something to fight for. And in the broader sense of this nostalgic regression, there's the sense that we have to have victims, and so for those who are proud white Americans, and I don't even want to use that, but those persons who identify with the agenda or the platform of President Trump's idea of nationalism, and that's what I consider. You know, I don't consider it racism. I do consider it the idea of nationalism, making America great again, and within the perspective of that, as I interpret it, you know, we want better jobs, we want better employment, we want to bring back manufacturing, because you know that all of that, and it does not include the breadth and depth of a greater vision of we want everybody to be everything. And I think that's part of the problem with how it's been presented. I think everybody wants America to be great again, but the perspective of what that looks like is how it's the problem. You know, it has been interpreted as making America go great again, as making America white nationalist. And I'm not talking about white nationalists as in white supremacists or anything, but just the idea that, you know, post World War II America, where you had the family with the home and the white picket fence and all of that stuff, you know, and you had people moving from the inner city to the suburbs, and you had a rise in wealth in both classes, in classes and races, and probably not classes, but definitely in races. So you had a rise in wealth across the spectrum of America. And in that sense, black conservatives and black centrists and black libertarians want that. But also white libertarians, white, I won't say liberals, but and I don't think white progressives. But you know, that's a whole different thing. And I apologize if to those who may be listening, and please don't misconstrue my words on that. Anyway, but there's this sense of we have to have a victim, and we have to have someone as oppressor. Who's the right role? Who fits the role of the oppressor? Of course, that's going to be the person who identifies with the perspective of what the Make America Great Again looks like. If they ascribe that to a privileged white male, then that's going to be the oppressor. If they ascribe it to a privileged black male, then that's going to be the oppressor. If they ascribe it to any person who does not ascribe to a platform, an all-inclusive platform for everyone, then that would be the oppressor. So we have to have an oppressor, we have to have a victim. The problem is we have a larger pool of victims because there's a larger demographic of persons trying to identify as victims. So, it's not just LBGTQIAP, whatever else anymore, but it's a greater pool, demographic pool, trying to identify as victim, and that is leading to, and from my perspective, that is leading to the very very sense of disconnect and dissonance that we are experiencing in our country. We should not be wanting to go back. And there's some great things in nostalgia, but when nostalgia becomes regressive, when it turns us away from our uh, best being, from being the best that we can be as a country and as individuals, as community, then it is very dangerous. And I believe that's the where we are right. That is where we are right now. We're living in a time where the nostalgia of both being a victim and having oppression. And I believe there is oppression. I don't believe here in the States we are as oppressed as we believe we ourselves to be, particularly as Black Americans. We're more privileged than any other um, established Black population across the world. And with pockets in Africa, on the continent of Africa, you'll find pockets of those. But here in the United States, we are more privileged than even in those countries in Africa. And definitely, as I stated before, my argument is that we have more privilege than any other African diaspora people across in the world. Um, so we can recognize that that is happening, but the question is now, how do we address it, and how do we uh, actualize ourselves to work against the regression that comes with the nostalgia? That, I believe, has to do with changing our mindset. We have to see the perspective of what is being fed to us, beginning with our history, beginning with the narratives that are fed to us from media that is saying that we're all victims and we should behave as such. That puts us back into the oppression. That's what putting it, because they're telling us we don't know how to handle ourselves and we need their help, and that's not true. We don't need the help of anyone. They can help us, but we must begin with liberating ourselves and liberating our mind, liberating our families, and controlling the narrative that we feed ourselves. And when we control the narrative that we feed ourselves, we become empowered and we become not victims but victors. That's one way. The second way, I think, is by engaging the entirety of the community. America is as diverse as it can get. Black people are diverse as we can get. We're more diverse now culturally than we've ever been before. There's no monolithic black culture. I had to learn that, and I'm still learning that. There's no monolithic black culture. We have to stop looking for a monolithic black leader or figure, messianic figure. We don't have it. We didn't have it with President Obama. We won't have it with Kamala Harris, Cory Booker. We won't have it with any other person in this time because of the diversity that we have now. That's why I celebrate the fact that our children now have been exposed to greater things than I was exposed to, that my generation was exposed to. And we grew up in a very diverse time. The music was diverse. MTV and VH1 and BT shared in how they presented music to us and all of that stuff. So we were on the cusp of the diversity that our children now fully experience. And the millennial children, they the concept of segregation is not the fact that they live in segregated areas. Even within those segregated areas that they live in, they themselves they're diverse. So they don't even experience the culture that they are living in, that they are currently experiencing the same way. we had the general sense of identity and cultural shared experiences. So, I could talk to anybody from my age group, and we could talk about New Edition. We could talk about Do Jack Swing. And we could talk about the rise of hip hop, and the cultural movement that came along with that, beginning in the late '80s. So we could talk about that. That's one shared cultural identity that connects us. But in this world today, there is no one shared cultural identity that's connecting them, unless you're talking about mumble rap. I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. I don't know. That was a bad joke. Um, but I say all of this to say that we have to be aware of what's really happening. Yes, there's a shifting that's taking place. There are some real paradigm shifts that's occurring in our time, and we have to be aware of how they are affecting us or disenfranchising us. Are they are what is happening to us as a result of this? And one thing I definitely see is that there's a greater sense of regressing back to this time of civil rights, and I don't think I'm not arguing that is not places for that. There are definitely cases where there's a call for us to do so, but I believe that overwhelmingly this regressive nostalgia is doing greater damage to us as a black people and to us as a country, politically, educationally, spiritually, and definitely culturally. So, um, anyway, yeah, I love for you to hear. I love to read your comments, hear your thoughts on this, and you can just leave your comments below. Share what you think about that. If you think I'm on the right track, I'd love to hear that. If you'd like to present a counter argument, please do so. Please don't troll me. I'm not here trying to um, get on anybody's nerves or have anybody debate me. I'm not trying to debate it. I was just putting this out there. Um, but anyway, if you whatever your thoughts, I welcome your thoughts. In the comment section, please like and subscribe and share this video across all your media. Then it's Dr. Lorenzo Neal. I really appreciate you for doing so, and you'll see all the information below on how you can support me and my channel, as well as listening to our broadcast that we do with Zira today. Thank you so much. God bless you.